We are live. Just
That's
a
us.
quick screen check. Yeah, we're coming through. Not got it coming through on YouTube yet. Yes, I do. Yeah, it's looking good.
All right.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Connect, another remote session from us. You've got the lovely Gary and myself, Harry, hosting this evening, along with our fantastic panel of cybersecurity and information security professionals and just general tinkerers. So this evening, we've got a singular topic that we'd like to explore with lots of interesting areas, and that is getting into cybersecurity for everything from search for a new job. We're going to cover how we all got into cybersecurity briefly, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about CV writing, personal profiles. We're going to talk about interviewing itself, so advice being an interviewee. Later on, we're going to talk about being an interviewer and some tips for people that actually conduct interviews and hiring managers in 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 interviews and hiring managers in
It's
interviews.
just Zoom just trying to overtake the conversation. No, we're not. We're
Resolved.
not talking about this.
Resolved. All resolved.
Brilliant. Awesome. Right. So, shall we start off with just a quick roundtable of introductions? Gary, go for it.
Yeah. So, do you want us to go through how we got into the industry and things as well, just as a brief way to it?
Why not?
Yeah. So, my name is Gary. I'm a security engineer at Skyscanner. I worked in retail and various different jobs, and then midway through my 20s decided to go back to university and target a career in cybersecurity. And then was lucky enough to land effectively an entry-level role at Skyscanner. And I've been in there for 3 years. So that's kind of exactly how I got into it. Shall we pass over? Go this way? Does this work? Magda, are you over there? I don't know.
No, you're on the other side of me, so
Come on.
never mind. That's fine. So my name is Magda, and I hear we've at least got one person on the call who can pronounce my name tonight, which is fantastic news for me. I've worked in cybersecurity for probably about 8 years now. How I got into it is purely by accident. I studied accounting at university after not making the cut for musical theatre. So that was my original plan, musical theatre. Then I ended up studying accounting. I've never worked as an accountant a day in my life. Did a lot of auditing, so internal audits. So that's kind of my background. Love auditors; they're wonderful people. And then I saw a job spec one time, all about kind of information security, role, policies, procedures, kind of the governance aspects of it, which I thought looked really, really interesting, but knew I would never have the experience for it. Ended up going for it anyway, and after about 6 months and 5 interviews later, the hiring manager decided to give me a chance, which I'm still grateful for today, because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here talking about information security stuff. I currently head up the security transformation team over at the student loans company. Been there only a couple of months, but it's been good fun so far.
Nominate the next person. Go for it.
Let's go with Angus Wright.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Angus Reid. I actually, in real life, go by Charles Ross. I'm a chief operating officer of a small boutique security recruiting agency. We predominantly do recruiting in the United States, a little bit in the UK, and then also here in sunny and troubled South Africa. I got into Infosec through a veterans group that I ran on Facebook with Swordfish from Twitter that some of you might know. She introduced me to someone, and I've been working in recruiting ever since. Before this, I served some time in the British military, and then also did 6 years in high risk security consulting, predominantly in East and West Africa and the Middle East. And now I do technically advanced security recruiting for Silicon Valley startups in the US, consulting companies, a lot of fintech, driverless tech, and then also a lot of recruiting in the US defense sector, and dabble in a bit in the UK. That's it from me. I think I should nominate someone. Maybe Federico wants to go next.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Good to meet you. And again, thank you for your service. My name is Federico Cherowski. I'm the MD of Quorum Cyber. I got into cyber since forever, over 20 years in it. I hated football and vegetarian. So growing up in Argentina made it a very lonely experience. Computers provided an easy outlet. So I was programming really badly in BASIC in a Commodore 64 when I was about 8. And ever since then, computers have been, or security became a thing. It was a little bit before the industry really existed, so I've seen it kind of develop around me, which was quite interesting. Everybody in my family always told me that this was a really bad choice and I should go into Java programming, which I absolutely hated. So I'm relatively glad I stuck with it. And next up, Sean. And please don't forget also, Sean, that you need to introduce, well, Sean's just left, which means he hates me. Harry, I nominate Harry. Do you want to tell us how you started?
I will indeed. Yeah, Sean's unfortunately just had to drop off due to a work call. It's one of the problems of cybersecurity. It's never stops. So I got into cybersecurity, I guess, when I chose to do a degree in it. So I moved to Edinburgh to study cybersecurity. I'd started a degree in computer studies in Liverpool and decided to move to Edinburgh for a girl, which is a terrible idea. So 6 weeks into my move to Edinburgh, got dumped, kept with cybersecurity, and never really looked back. So, some things lead to happier endings than others.
It's the true person who really cares for you, cybersecurity.
Yeah, that loving embrace. So I came into my final year of university at Edinburgh Napier, and a company called ECS, or ECS Security more specifically, came in to do a recruit drive. They hired me straight out of uni before I finished my degree. And then, the rest is history. Done many roles, starting from working in security operations centers through to security engineering and consulting on mostly security operations, funnily enough. Then big data, and now I'm the product lead for detection and response at Adama. Brilliant. So introduction's done. How we get into cyber done. What's next? Well, I think, Gary, that is over to you to chair a half-an-hour discussion on everything that comes before getting an interview.
Yeah, so I figured we'd take it from the top, right? I mean, this is the hardest bit. So I think probably what everyone's acutely aware of at the moment is it's tough. I think there's some market reality set in for all of us. However, I guess at the same point, there's a lot of opportunity in the industry. This is an industry that I'm quite sure all of us are used to sitting behind the camera like this every single day of the working week, because this has become our reality. So we are quite a resilient industry, but obviously there's lots of things happening. Senior roles and entry-level roles are also impacted at various levels. So I guess I want to kind of kick this off and say it's fine. It takes time, but we're here to try and see if we can hash out some of the ideas maybe around about places that you can look to start with. So does anyone have any experience, again, to kick things off in entry-level roles? Let's start with the kind of the more entry stuff. So has anyone run them or given advice out for those? I know I've spoke to some of you about this, and I'm sure you have something to say on it.
Sure, I can chime in. So, obviously, when we're working with a recruiting company, companies would typically use us to look for things they can't find themselves. So, mid to senior level roles, and then executive level, typically very technically advanced. So, unfortunately, we are not really utilized on the junior and entry level front. I do, however, have a lot of interactions with junior engineers and consultants and entry-level people, graduates. I always try to give back to the community as much as I can. So I do a lot of like resume reviews and volunteer a lot of conferences to do these resume reviews and career workshops. So the biggest change I think that COVID's brought on is that it's gone from a market where you, the candidate, holds the golden key because your skill set is in such high demand, and due to budgetary things and the economy, globally, it's changed very quickly. Also, with a lot of companies shutting down, retrenchments, and people losing their jobs, especially in the United States. There's suddenly a lot more qualified people on the market. However, I do think this is a very temporary problem to have. So COVID has definitely had a massive impact. Like for myself, Silicon Valley is dead in the water at the moment. Consulting companies are hardly hiring. Defense is strong. Defense is booming though. So it's a tricky time. I think the biggest thing that people fail to realize when they try to get a job is I think they misthink certain things of how important they are. When doing their resumes, they don't lead with what makes them a good and viable candidate, and lack of community engagement. I get a lot of people that also when I ask them, like always ask on an interview, like, what's your community involvement? And a lot of them say, well, my company doesn't really pay for me to conferences, so why should I go? And I'm like, well, I'm a B-sides Cape Town organizer, and I'm an organizer because I was a volunteer, and I was a volunteer because I once bought a ticket. We have a lot of people that volunteer that can't afford to buy tickets. So, you come in, volunteer for a couple of hours, you can go to as many talks you want, you can do workshops. So, I find that as um, a bad way to go about it. So I think involvement in the community within a balance is a huge part. Most people, I think, there's this thing, something like 75% of people get their jobs from people they know, and usually that's family and friends in the old days, but now that 70% can be increased by having a few friends in the community, and being involved to some extent.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, I know people that have reached out to this group specifically for the Cyber Scotland Connect, probably a good point to plug the Twitter and the Slack community that we have as well, and asked about roles. And there is an element of that might not be a role today, but we have sometimes a little bit of horizon ahead of us in terms of we know what's coming. And we also know if some companies locally that normally have grad intake schemes or these types of different programs have maybe frozen those as well. So I think it's a very good point. Magda, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate what Charles was saying there in terms of junior roles and recruitment agencies. I know, just being on the other side, being a hiring manager now, that we're not allowed to work with recruitment agencies for junior roles. Again, we're only allowed to use them for the more senior hires, as Charles was saying, the ones that we can't find generally. So it really, at a junior level, it really is about the networks. And I think CSC, the Slack channel, is a great place to go because there's always stuff going in the recruitment channel. I would, stuff that we have available, I would always post on kind of my LinkedIn or there, or, put out on Twitter as well, just to make people aware to apply. So it's important to, to find those places that collate, and I found from my own experience that the Indeeds and the Reads of the world don't always show up all of the things. I know SLC is a bit of a weird one because we're on a Gov UK website, so I'm not sure that recruitment sites even aggregates that stuff. I can never find them myself. So that is really important to, spread your net wide. The other thing is I would like to address or just mention is, of course, security, information security, cybersecurity. What we talk about as Infosec roles is such a wide variety of things. Not everybody can be a pen tester. If you're walking out of uni and you've just done an ethical hacking degree and you're like, I'm totally going to do this, fair enough. If you absolutely know that's what you want to do, then those are roles you should be looking for. But there's so many other roles out there, types of roles out there. A lot of, so my team run business or security assurance for projects, and some of the hires we've had internally don't even come from a technical background. They're like business analysts, or they've worked in operations because they understand the business so well that we can train them on other stuff. So yeah, just not everybody can be a pen tester. So when you're looking for those entry-level roles, understand that there's such a wide field out there.
I recall you had an infographic for this, didn't you? It was like an infographic of all the different roles.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it was,
I did find something.
Yeah, it was full on. I'll not put you on the spot and ask you, but if we get it, I'll drop it into the chat for this at least. Okay, so networking is huge. Federico, do you maybe have something to say about things like, I don't know, maybe LinkedIn, or if it's just, is it a case of like mailing a CV to people?
I had both a question actually
All right,
there,
go for it.
and yeah, that's as good as well. So I had a question for Angus as well. So I'll take that one first. I think the networking is a really heavy term that we need to add some nuance to, because I think a lot of people that are maybe uncomfortable with being part of a social scene, being seen, that doesn't mean that this is a gate that without being a great networker and small chatter, you can't find a job. However, you do need to acknowledge there's a massive way of connecting to people. This is about people. And hiring a junior for hiring managers usually is about cultural fit, not technical fit. So we assess that, at least I assess that. And I think by the nodding, bobbing heads, I think a lot of us do to a certain degree about the how well would you fit to a team? Are you a nice person? Are you a nice human to work with? Do you think that you're going to support others and you're going to be willing to learn? These things come across much better outside of the framework of an interview. They come across through social interaction. So there's a massive heavy component there. But as Gary said, that's not the only way to do that. If you're not socially inclined to loving the beers and the chat and the kind of nights out, which not everybody can, especially if you, for example, are coming into this later in life, and you have a family or you have obligations that prohibit you from attending events. So I would say that's an avenue. Definitely you should look at it, but there's many other ways. And I think I wanted opinions from this room. If we discount for a moment not being the social bug, what do we think are the best mechanisms to getting notoriety? And I'll volunteer a couple, right, that I've seen very effectively. People running and capture the flag events or defend the flag events are really good ways of you being part of a community, being part of what you can achieve and demonstrating what you can achieve without you necessarily having beers with the hiring managers every day. Volunteering, as Angus said, in community projects and people that need the help. And as Magda said as well, taking jobs that are non-security related, but showing up to work and showing that you can be part of a team and picking up skills and committed to achieve. These are all ways that you could demonstrate that you're a really good candidate without you necessarily being a social bug. But opening up, like Miguel, for example, for the more introvert on us, I'm not picking on you for this. I'm just asking you because you haven't spoken to. Don't take offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think CTFs are definitely a good place to start. Bug bounty programs as well. I know that a couple of the university societies do run programs sort of around immersive labs, for example, or the Rasta Mouse labs, etc., where you can actually get some notoriety there. Let me just pick up on something that Maggie said. As part of the recruiting process where I am, I also, for junior positions, we don't really rely on agencies. We're more, or recruiters. We're more expecting people just to email us their CVs, and that does really work. My mailbox is open. Anyone can send me their CV, even if I'm not, even if I think it's not a good fit for my organization. I can definitely either point you in the right direction or give you feedback on your CV, saying just improve this, talk a little bit more about this or that. The other thing I would also say is, and this is specifically for pen testers, because that's the part that I know of, is there are so many pieces of software out there. Just choose one at random, throw some skills at it. You will learn something. Maybe you'll get something published out of that, and that is definitely of value for any person hiring. I think it's and it works whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, really, because it is definitely representative of what you would be doing as a pen tester. Maybe not as sort of like a risk manager or something like that, or a security analyst in a SOC, but as a pen tester, there's nothing better than actually being able to show, look, I've tried this. Even if you don't find anything, you can still go, I've tried all of this. I know one of the suggestions that is really, really common is, start a blog and start publishing blog posts. I don't really. I see a lot of value there. I don't do it myself because I'll admit it. I am lazy, or not lazy. I'm not disciplined enough to publish content regularly. And if you are not, I think having a blog that hasn't been updated in 6 months or a year, it's worse than not having anything at all. But doing write-ups, random bits that you can publish on GitHub, for example, etc., that is of a tremendous value for anyone hiring.
2 points on that one, if you don't mind. Sorry, Harry, I'll hand over the baton in 2 seconds. Following up from that, because it's straight to the point of what Miguel was saying, I would also recommend not doing things such as adding tools that you don't totally master to your CV. And I see this so often of people that are just putting a collection of tools that they came across, or that they're just listing the Cali directory of tools. Please don't do that, because we're going to ask you if you put something in a CV, and it's really embarrassing for everybody if we ask you and your shallow knowledge comes through. So nobody needs to see that. So just don't put it unless you really feel comfortable to answer questions. And in the same way, for non-pen tester jobs, other types of things you can do is contribute to open source projects. So if you're more Dev oriented, contributing to open source projects is a great way of showing what you can do. And again, if you have a particular inclination, post it in the questions. If you have a role that we're not covering, but it'd be good to see if we can come up with ideas for different roles. Sorry, Harry, back to you.
No, it's all really good points made. I think so. I've always been so far on the blue side of life, so in the kind of defender space, SOC background, and I think one of the things that comes out of when people interview for junior and senior positions is there are many ways to demonstrate competence, and many have been mentioned, blogging. If you are interested in writing and you find it and you're passionate about it, then blog all you want, whether that's doing detailed write-ups on GitHub, GitLab, or hosting your own domain on WordPress or Medium, Ghost, whatever, then that's awesome, and that's something that you can call out in your resume and in your interview. But if you don't like it, if you don't find joy doing that type of work, don't do it, because it will come through very quickly. Your first post will be amazing and then it will die, and quite rightly so, just like my blog that hasn't been updated for 3 years. Now, it's not done that because I don't like writing. It's not a passion of mine, but I did it because I wanted to have a blog and write about stuff.
If I may add to that, I think when people do blogging, and that includes me, you think, I'm going to do a blog for my social media presence, and to post stuff on Twitter and get more followers and get all these tons of readers. But I think something I've learned about recently with one of my clients is they ask people if they have like a digital journal. So that's not like dear diary, today I went on a date. It's about keeping a bit of a record of what challenge you faced that day, how you solved it, and what you learned from it. So, for instance, for me, yes, I'm a recruiter, but I want to be a digital forensics consultant one day. And what I did is I set up my own GitHub, and I've got a repo there called Cali Learning, and it is like the most basic stuff you could ever think of. So every time I learn a new command on Cali, then I write there, and I write CD, and I say equals change directory, and how these little things come into play. And when I had to change a password, I keep little records. So the point I'm trying to make is, if someone does a blog, people think like it has to be, like a big hoo-ha and lots of like pictures and gifs and memes, and it has to have presence, and it has to have a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It has to have a bit of production value behind it. Whereas in theory, it doesn't. It could be something very small, can be little snippets, because a lot of my clients like to see someone's trajectory, especially if they are self-taught. A lot of my clients prefer self-taught people than people with master's degrees and a bunch of certs, because they can see that progression, they can see how they solve problems, they can run through that and very quickly ascertain sort of what direction you're working in from looking at where you've come from. So basically, you don't always think about having, a blog on Medium that gets X amount of read. Like, I'm saying Afrikaans, and we've got Afrikaans, we were saying liefde kom vanself, which means love just comes with time, right? So the followers will come with a time. If you are solving problems that other people are also struggling with, you're going to get your followers. Just don't think about having that wow factor from day one, and just keeping us a nice, short, steady blog. You can always do the big stuff, the big production stuff, and post that to Twitter and make a thing out of it. But I think a lot of people are scared to blog, and I struggle with that as well, because they think they have to, they read all these big blogs, and they're like, mine's not going to be the same, mine's not going to be as good. Like it doesn't matter. It all adds value.
So
And also,
something that, sorry, Gary.
I just want to address a couple of the questions in the YouTube chat. So we have a couple pieces about this, about people that have maybe been working in the industry. So I've got an example of Brian, who says he's been working 14 years in a side role, and not a security specific role, but an IT sales operation account management role. And then Tart and Turtles, who's also saying something about, like, is this the type of advice? Would you give any different advice to someone that was older, that maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to university? I mean, obviously, I think the commonality here is the ability to learn and demonstrate that you can pick up new skills, but I don't know if anyone would like to talk to that.
So I wanted to highlight, Kasanga's mentioned that as well there, and I thought it was super important. Degrees do not equate higher chances of getting hired in the industry anymore. So please do not think that you need to have a master's degree or 3 PhDs, because that's not how we curate. That's not. It's a piece of telemetry. Having a degree is a piece of telemetry. When we're hiring somebody, we're capturing 50, 60, 100 pieces of telemetry that tell us different things about the candidate, and it's not a thing. So don't make it a thing. Harry and I have great experience through the times in ECS security. We did a lot of work with college dropouts, and there was some of the best talent we've ever hired, because being academic does not mean that you're good at cybersecurity. And some people are great at taking exams, some people are great at taking certs, some people are not, and they're great at writing code or exploits or managing other people or dealing with incidents. We are all totally different, and we hiring managers know this. So don't buy the myth that if you don't have a master's degree, you won't get into the door, because that's complete BS. That's just not true.
I would, however, call out, and as a, I guess, call to action, if you're a hiring manager or you work in HR or recruitment, that do listen to those kind of sentiments, because that is the kind of thing you should be following, because there are gatekeepers out there, and there are policy-based gatekeeping, which is, not an individual's fault necessarily, but at some point someone's made a prerequisite that a box must be ticked. But that shouldn't be the case. It has to do with overall competence, and roles require different types of competence to be successful in their delivery.
Yeah, if I can add to what you were saying there, and maybe address, I've just seen the latest question around, if you don't have a degree, what else can you do? So for me, as a hiring manager, it is about the cover letter. Now, I know they are tedious, they are horrid to write, and I'm not saying you have to write War and Peace, but for a recent junior analyst role that we published, I got over 30 applications. Some of them, one person, a lot of them, and this goes to show with the market as well. So this is a junior analyst position, which I would have expected a recent graduate or someone with maybe 2 to 3 years experience, really entry level. I had people applying with over 20 years experience. I had someone with a law degree, a legal degree, working at a legal firm applying. Now, for me, that's great, but I don't know why you've applied. If you're just sending me the stock standard CV that you send every single other person, and I need to narrow it down, I cannot interview 30 people. I'm sorry, but I just do not have the time to do that. I try and interview maybe 5, 6 people. How do I narrow that down? And if you've not put that in there, either through a cover letter to say, I saw this role and I think it's awesome for these reasons, and I think I'd be really great at it because I've got this and this and this transferable skill or this experience that really matches what you're looking for, or at least a top paragraph in your CV that says, I'm this kind of person, I'm looking for this kind of role, I've been doing sales for so long, but I've really been, interested in this field, and that's why I'm applying for this role. For me, that makes all the difference in getting you that interview.
It's that last minute sales pitch, right? It's just, please read on. Please just give me a chance in this. Has anyone, I know we talked about the in-person networking. It's awfully hard at the moment, let's be honest. The thing I've noticed an uprise in is students and potentially people that have recently graduated just in the last semester here, reaching out on LinkedIn and having chats. I've always been quite open to talk to them. definitely kind of shape the discussions. Even if there's not opportunities with ourselves at the moment, it's definitely been something that I've always flagged them towards recruitment channels or pointed them towards certain things. I know there's some great, and there's some kind of questions back jumping around about this, but there's also a lot of great online platforms. Hack the Box, Try Hack Me. I'm going to miss 100 million off the top of this. I'm sure we can do a better job as a community to curate some of the ones that we use and ones that we would endorse. And I'm quite sure we probably should be sharing some of that out as well. So I'll take that as an action at the end of this to see if we can pull that together as a group. Because those aren't officially certs, but they might be £10 a month. They might be free up to a certain point. And they do give you quite good hands-on experience in quite a safe way. There's always, I remember going to university and there was always that disclaimer at the start of the year going, remember, with great power comes great responsibility. And that you do need a lot of permission to just go out and try a lot of the stuff you can see online against real targets, especially if you're in that offensive group. So that's the only warning I'd give. Don't just go out there and start hacking companies we all work for. Although I appreciate your enthusiasm, not your approach. That's the only thing I'd say on that.
Gary, we've got a whole bunch of questions on Slido.
Over there as well, yeah.
And I'm conscious that we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'll read out the top three and then we'll see time-wise what we've got when it comes to the end of the three topics. So the top three that have been upvoted. The first one is, what advice would you give to someone when preparing for a technical interview?
I would say prepare. Like I know it sounds like something silly to say, but the thing that some people fail at, especially comes to technical interviews and tech tests and take-home tests and professional CTS that people have to do to get a job and write reports, is sometimes they, especially if they're interviewing with a lot of different companies, apply to a lot of different places, they fail to realize what potentially could be at the end of this, right? So I did a talk recently and I said, when applying for jobs, I used to be a contractor. I could apply for like 100 jobs in a day, like no problem. Didn't even keep an Excel spreadsheet about it, right? And then people call you and say, hey, are you interested? The fact is, you need to treat every job as if it could potentially be a dream job. So I've had candidates that can line up for a tech test and they're like, how hard can it be? And then when they get there, they get caught proverbially with their pants down and they don't know what they're doing. And then they're so focused and so drilled in and trying to solve the problem that they forget to take screenshots and write the report at the end, right? And then at the end of it, they realize they didn't prepare at all. And when they don't get the job, which like basically they went into thinking, how could the job be? I've never heard of this tech company, like whatever, I'll just, give it a go. And at the end of it, when word starts spreading around town about how cool the company is or how much they pay or how good the benefits are, these people come back with regrets and they come to me and they say, hey, can I test out again? I'm like, it's kind of like a one test kind of thing. So the key is preparing. Try ascertain as much information as you can from the people doing the testing. If you're doing a basic thing on HackerRank, like you don't sweat about it too much. But if you're going to do a full CTF, try ascertain, like, is it Linux infrastructure? Is it Windows? Am I going to have to doing any reverse engineering? Because then people need to set up a whole different rig to do that. Password cracking. The more information you can get, the better. I, as a recruiter, will always give my people as much information as I can, but often I'm not given information for, obvious reasons. Like then I can just help my candidates. I always try steer my candidates in a direction if they're struggling. Like some people are extremely good technical, but they've never done a CTF. So I will tell them, like, what have you got? They go, oh, I've got an IP address. I'm like, okay, run Nmap, do asset discovery, see what you can find, and then play around with it. But yeah, try find out as much information as you can. Try set up your rig ready for that, and just do a bit of preparation. It's I think that's what the 5 Ps, which I won't speak out, but it will literally help you and prepare you best for doing that tech challenge or a technical interview.
One extra comment on that one is also keep in mind what it is that we're trying to evaluate, because not every tech evaluation is about a binary answer. For example, a lot of them are more about seeing you think and how you resolve a problem and how do you attack frustration. It's the Kobayashi Maru situation. We're not always expecting you to resolve the scenario. We just want to see how you tackle it and how you think about it. So keep that in mind. If you focus on the one thing because you want to crack that one thing, that also tells you something about you, whether you fix it or not.
One of the things I would like to add as well, and it ties in with the preparation that Angus was mentioning, is try to find typical questions for that type of role. There are questions we ask every time. If you're trying for a pen testing position, you need to be expected to be able to explain the difference between UDP and TCP. So basic questions like that, although we are not trying to understand whether you know that difference or not, sometimes it's obviously depending on the level, sometimes just the fact that it shows that you prepared and you know those answers like that, that is a good thing. Good comments that I'm reading there. Yeah. I'm actually. So Angus said, "Don't Google stuff during the interview." I actually don't have issues with that, as long
Especially
as
if you have a mechanical keyboard.
Yeah, but I don't have issues with that, as long as you're not reading an answer, because sometimes it's just a little detail that you just need to sort of unblock your brain, or you don't know exactly what the person asked, and just by looking at the terminology, oh, he wants to know about this. I don't have issues with people Googling stuff during my technical interviews. My issue is if they're just reading and just clearly just blagging themselves out of the hole that they dug themselves. Other than that, I think preparation is key. Google for typical interview questions on this topic, and you will find multiple ones.
Just one thing to be critically aware of is ask questions. It's rare, at least in my experience, that you're forbidden from asking a question to any interview question, technical or competency based. If you need more information or you don't recognize an acronym, ask what it is. It will help you hopefully give an answer that tells the interviewer what you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next top question. 21 years plus software dev and teaching experience, just completed a master's in advanced security and digital forensics. Chances of switching careers at an older age?
Best example is, I think, Infosec Sherpa on Twitter. She was a librarian or like a library scientist or something, right? And she switched over she's been a librarian for an extensive period of time, and she may switch over very well. Now she works for one of the biggest media publishing newspapers in the world. So I don't think there's massive limitations. Look, I think if you're 85, you're kind of pushing your luck, but it's fair and it's reasonable. I know a lot of people that have at a over 30, over 40 age transferred over and done phenomenally well. You bring a sense of maturity to certain projects, which is always seen of value.
One of the things, and again, sorry to keep beating on the pen testing side, one of the most important things for a pen tester is the ability to think outside the box. And sometimes that ability comes from stepping back and being able to look at the whole picture and having a different perspective on it. This means that actually having a different background is something good. It's really, really good that the fact that you can just see things a different way, you will think about attack vectors and openings that the devs probably didn't think about. So I don't see that as an issue. I do agree with Angus. If you're 85, well, yeah, maybe it might be a little bit tougher. I'm not saying that 84-year-olds can do it and 85 can't, but I don't think age is a problem. I would say,
however,
I would just say that the only thing is, and I talk against myself because I have turned 40, is I cannot pull the all-nighters that I could before. and that is definitely to age. That's the only thing, but it doesn't impact my ability to deliver work at all.
However, there's a problem, right, that we do need to acknowledge, which is people coming into this later in life will have different, usually financial requirements in order to support a family and in order to support a lifestyle. And that's a problem that you need to accept, right? And it's not something that the industry can necessarily fix for you. But if you are switching after you've done 20 years of a career and you're wanting to start from scratch, the challenge, in my experience, usually comes with the financial difference, right, of what an entry-level job in the industry will bring compared to where you were in your old job. So this is an assessment that you can make. You can have the conversations, and I think a lot of companies will be receptive to having a chat about that. But we can't ignore that there's a financial impediment to changing and restarting careers later in life.
I mean, I tracked a couple of the jobs here in Scotland, a couple senior positions that might have come up in some large organisations associated with the government. I'll leave that there. And the people that went into those cyber roles weren't from traditional cyber backgrounds. They were from IT and management backgrounds. It's flipping it over to the blue team, the defence side of things. One of the things, and if my colleagues are watching this, please don't take this offensively, that some of the people in the industry on the blue team miss is the business mind. We operate a business. We are seen as a cost centre inside of our own business. We need to deliver value to the business. And there's always going to be place for either management that brings that or other members of the team that can offer that sort of skill set as well. So there's definitely parallels in there. Whether that means you're coming in at entry or mid, probably more mid, but there will be those senior roles where they're looking for much more of a manager to deliver a project. And at that point, it actually probably doesn't matter what you did as long as you did management and you delivered on big projects. Cyber is just a Kanban board.
I was going to add to that. It's like Fedi was also saying, if you're going to make that switch, be realistic about what you want. If you want to become a penetration tester, you're probably going to have to start very, very junior. But if you're willing to go kind of that mid-level, more of a management, less technical, but you get that security knowledge, absolutely possible. And, as I said, be clear about what you want from it, and then be able to tell me why you can get it, why you can do it. What are those skills that you have that you can transfer to this role that makes it applicable?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so final question, and then we are going to talk more about the actual interviewing itself. Although, there's lots of blurred lines here; they all kind of lead together. What advice would you give to a recent cybersecurity graduate with no IT experience? Keep getting knockbacks from even entry support roles.
That was me. I'll put my hand up and say, literally 3 years ago to the day, that was me. I literally had worked in retail. I run my own business in the entertainment industry. God bless them all at the moment. And literally I had zero experience in IT. I had an interest, a heavy passion, and a bit of luck. I had met people through this group. And previous to this, the Tech Scotland one, the Startup Scotland, I think it was. I forget the name. And that was literally a case of I did a lot of homework. I did something like 12 PowerPoint slides. There's another talks probably somewhere floating around the internet about this, but I did like 12 slides and like understanding every technology that they had in deployment in production and then what they used effectively in their operations center. There's no golden tickets, however, and I totally appreciate that even we have frozen our graduate schemes at the moment. I think there was another question floating around about, just briefly, there was one that said something along the lines of, do you go for big or small companies? If a small company's hiring for an entry role right now, they probably have a piece of work pressing that they need delivered. That is very much that, who get to know them and probably show that you can help support them, because behind every business, there's a person that set that business up and that runs that business. The bigger you go, the more checkboxes you need to hit. I would definitely say when it comes to your kind of big tech giants in California, you're probably needing much more behind you in terms of qualifications or certificates or anything to the effect. Whereas smaller businesses, if you can deliver for them, are probably more going to take the chance. I'm sure there's people here that can probably speak a lot more first-hand experience to that, but that's my initial impression.
One of the things I would add to that is one of the frustrations that I can feel can come from that situation is that it's out of your control. You feel that you're doing your best and you're getting nowhere, and you just don't know how to keep going. One of the things that would be within your control is try to get as much feedback as you can. And I'll cover this in the next session where we're talking about the interviews, because we're doing a piss poor job of providing feedback to the candidates we don't take. And I will be angry at us on that hat. But on this side of the fence, something that's within your control is ask for feedback, because it's not that you might be doing something worse, but the key question that I ask, and it's the same question that I ask when I don't get a proposal, when I don't win a piece of business, is what could we have done to win this? So the question that I want you to ask is what could I have done better in order to be your favorite candidate? And you might not get answers for everybody, but at least they'll give you an idea of something that you could bring within the sphere of your own control and you can affect for the next interview.
Yeah. On the large versus small companies, again, it's not a one is better than the other, but there are some things that I think can help calibrate the kind of company and the possible company culture you might be walking into. In my experience, which is limited, but you've got smaller companies or startups that if you're the kind of person willing to put in the time and you want to stand out, it's a lot easier to stand out in that environment, but you are far less insulated and supported in many cases, because a lot of startups, they're free for alls. Everyone's just trying to get the job done so the company doesn't go under, so they can scale and become the next big thing. And that's awesome, and it presents a huge opportunity, but it can be really scary and it can involve a lot of effort and work. Now, in the larger companies, it's not that you can't stand out, but it means that you're often competing against a lot more people and with a lot more competing priorities. So rather than, it being 2 hops between you and the CEO or the CTO or whatever, it's now 15 hops. So what is the likelihood of you going for a beer with that person or getting 15 minutes to chat with them versus in a startup of 20 people or even 100 people? That's still a relatively small company where, virtually everyone's name. It's pros and cons, but the large companies possibly got better benefits and possibly more job security, but your salary might increase at a slower rate if you're not in there, top 2% or whatever else. So it's pros and cons of both, but it's kind of looking at who you are and what you need in that moment. You can always change, you can always move and evolve.
The last thing I would say is just don't give up, because the first few attempts did not work. I know Angus mentioned some of the tests that you do, or some of the candidacies that you do are sort of like a one-off things, or one opportunity kind of things. That's usually not the case for when you're. The most common case isn't that, because it might be that at that particular time you weren't successful in your candidacy, but that might change at a later point. So
Definitely.
don't be shy to sort of submit and resubmit.
Don't bombard though. That's
yeah, of course,
thing that people make. They will, like, I see it in my applicant tracking system when people apply for jobs. Like, I could give you 6 names now of people that will apply for a job with us every 3 days, and it's like, if you apply for a job now and you apply for a job in 8 to 12 months, that is definitely worth a reconsideration. If you had a terrible resume at the start and now the resume is freshened up, sure, like, send it on over. But recruiters get to know your name. I probably only consider about 2% of our applications, and the reason for that is we get a lot of bad applications. And when I say that, I literally mean the person's skill set versus what the job is like worlds apart. I get a cake maker that has nothing to do with technology applying for an advanced CNO position that requires high level of security clearance. It's worlds apart. So what I mean with that is just when you apply for a job, just like take a minute, look at it, read about it, consider it. When you do your application, don't just go like, don't think I need to get this application out the way so I can move on to the next one. Take a bit of time, keep a bit of a database, like a spreadsheet of where you're applying. So when you get a call back, you know what it's about. Because I remember as a contractor, it'd be bad. I apply for a job and suddenly I get a phone call. I hate doing phone calls. It's ironic that I'm a recruiter, but anyway, that someone would call me and say, "Hey, are you interested in the job?" And I'm like, what job? And they're like, the job with us. I'm like, who are you? And they, are we a company such and such? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Then I have to try and figure out what the job is because I didn't keep a record of it. So just take your time with it. You can apply for the same job multiple times, but like, be realistic about it. If you weren't successful now, you probably won't be successful in the next 6 months, potentially in a year. And also, if you are applying for a job that you believe is highly competitive, like if there's a job for a junior or entry level job, it's going to be highly competitive. Pen testing job, highly competitive. Analyst job, highly competitive. I.e., there's going to be a lot of people applying. Make sure there is nothing in your process and your resume and your covering letter that makes you an easy rejection. I'm talking like some of the most basic things that people get wrong. They will misspell something. And yes, I have friends that are dyslexic. I have friends that struggle to read and write, right? And it's fine. Like if you want to label it, you can label it. But if I see a lot of spelling mistakes in someone, then I will think about maybe they are challenged or diverse in that way. But if you make like one or two spelling mistakes in simple places, it looks really bad. That's all I say. Don't get someone to build a resume. Do it yourself. Get someone to review it that understands the industry. Like I do that at the moment. I help anyone that wants it. Um, and then get it looked at by someone that is good with English. Like I get my mom to read my resume because she used to be an English teacher, right? If the technical people approve it and my mother approves it and someone that has nothing to do with this industry approves of it, then I'm on a wicket. Like people, like a small thing, I set up a questionnaire on our applicant tracking system for one sole reason. It wasn't to get more information from people, because when we post jobs and they go to a website like Indeed have this cool thing, like you can use an Indeed resume. You fill out your profile and you can just use that Indeed resume to apply for jobs. Indeed formatted resumes are diabolically bad. Like if I see one, I do not want to read it. And maybe that is me being wrong or me being lazy, but it looks so bad because it doesn't represent you. It represents what Indeed thinks of you. So always try to use your own resume as well. I think that partly answers the question or the statement.
It does. And right, so we are now gonna move on. So thank you everyone who's sending questions. We will, if we've got time at the end, still cover as many as we can off the Slido. There is still about another 10 or 15 that have been submitted. Keep submitting them. We're gonna switch things up a bit, and we're now gonna move to general advice for hiring managers, for people that are responsible for interviewing and for interviewing people. And Fede is going to lead us in that. And let's see where we go.
Thanks, Harry. I was really keen on this session because I think we have a job to do here, and I think we need to get better at what we're doing, because we're starting to. It's getting messy, and I think as an industry we need to do better at being more responsible and ethical hiring managers. So the point of the session, I think, was how can we, with the hat of the hiring manager, improve the hiring experience for the candidates, for the companies that are hiring as well, but what are the aspects that make a good interview? What are the aspects that we can make under our roles as hiring managers to make that experience a better time for everybody? And when I started planning for this one, I made a kind of brain dump of things that I think make things better. And I was planning on kind of picking a couple and try to discuss them. I think nobody's going to disagree, so I'm not sure it leads to a great conversation. So what I'll do is I'll pick my top three, and then I'll go around the table asking for, what are we not saying here? What are the top three things that you would recommend makes for a better interview, for the interview, for the interviewer, and that actually leads to better outcomes? And by that, I mean better relationships. I mean, we tend to forget that we're looking at people. So I'll go three random of my list of 20. So if we're missing things, I can add, because I couldn't stop writing when I started. One of the ones that I got told off, I asked the question to a friend of mine who was a very senior recruiter. And it was a really stupid question, actually. I regret asking it because it was really unempathetic, but the asking the question and getting the answer was incredible, which was, if I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking for a role and I'm having a really bad day or really busy, crazy day to day, and there's an interview that I'm meant to be doing and I'm not in the best frame of mind to come into that interview, what should I do? Should I just cancel that interview and tell the candidate, look, can we reschedule it tomorrow, or should I take it? And the answer came back was dramatically stark, was, that's the most important part of that person's day. how dare you think that you have something more important to do? And it was such a humbling point of, we do not think enough about the stress, the preparation, and the situation that the candidates are going for when they're coming to an interview. We as hiring managers very often fall into a really bad habit of another interview for this role, third of the day, fourth of the day, we're tired, we're coming to it, there's a whole bunch of work that's going on, our team management, our sales process, and we come to this not paying the due diligence that this and the due care that we have in the position of power that we have. There's a power disbalance between hire and interviewer that is massive, and we owe it to ourselves, to the industry, and to the candidates to treat that with a lot of respect. And we do not get to say we're too tired to do this interview properly, and we do not get to say we're not just showing up to it. So if you're a hiring manager, please consider that one. So I'll open that one for quick discussion. Everybody's nodding violently, which is great. Magda, what do you think?
Well, I'll just share my own story about that. Absolutely. Last year, when I was interviewing, because I was just coming back off maternity leave, wasn't going to stay with my old role because it required far too much travel. And I was like that. So I had a 10-month-old baby at the time. My husband was back at work. And I had an interview for the Friday. Now, of course, that for me is loads. I need to organize. I needed to get a babysitter, and it was all geared up for that. My husband decided to take the morning off, so he could watch the baby. And then, literally, the afternoon before, 4 o'clock on the Thursday, the recruiter said to me, "Are you all ready for your interview in Glasgow?" I'm based in Edinburgh. I was like, "Oh, hold up, no, no," because Glasgow is an hour away. That's an hour there, an hour interview, an hour back. I was, I had a babysitter for like 2.5 hours. Now we're talking 3 hours plus if nothing goes wrong. I can't, I could not do that. And for me, it was such a stressful situation because I wasn't given all the information in the beginning. Because yes, it took me, it wasn't, I couldn't just arrange things and, just at the drop of a hat, go to an interview, because I had a lot to organize because I'm a person and I have a life. So yeah, that really resonated with me, what you said there.
Gary?
Yeah, I mean, I showed up to an interview absolutely soaked in rain. It was a typical Scottish day, and I got told the person's not here, and my heart sank. I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And I was literally still at that point, 5 minutes before had just come through the door, taking the raincoat off, but literally was soaked. And they went, but don't worry, they're going to dial in from where they are. And they made the time. So 100% you need to make that time to do that. It's really important to do it. I mean, I've seen in big companies, emails get lost. It happens. Get someone to cover it. I've seen people sitting in receptions before and it's like, hey, I'm sorry, that person's now 5 minutes late. We can't get them. We're going to get someone else to come down. That's not ideal because then that interviewer isn't prepared, and that's where standardized things come into place. But
I was going to jump straight into that one. So I think it's a perfect segue into, we also have an obligation as hiring managers to really prepare for interviews. And that means a series of things. I think it means understanding what the format of that interview is going to look like. If we're trying to combat biases and give honest chances for equality and inclusivity, we need to have an auditable framework for that interview. We need to be asking the same bloody questions, and we need to be trying to measure the same attributes out of a candidate for that. We cannot be coming to these roles with a collection of human biases that we all carry. And the only way that we get to combat biases is by actually making processes standard and open and transparent and queryable. I know Harry in particular has a particular affinity for this line of thought. The last point I'd add to that one would be as well, there are such things as bad questions, interviewers. Please stop asking the manhole cover question. This is not an opportunity for you to be clever. This is an opportunity for you to meet someone and to understand their background and their interests and their aspirations and what they want to do and how they can add value. This is not about showing off how smart you are.
Yeah, and that is even more important. No, sorry, not as equally as important for the organization to understand, because Google funded a whole bunch of studies on their own hiring processes, and they published it all under a thing called Rework. Published the independent studies that were conducted, the interviewing frameworks and the results. And one of the findings of this study was, essentially those types of questions, those problem-solving questions, that they basically they could not consistently in any way predict the success of a candidate. They only consistently made the interviewer feel very smart. And some people are great at those kind of logic puzzles, and it's not to say that there's no value in them. Yes, they may show some types of reasoning skills and some types of the way people's brains are mapped out. That's fine. But if they're not a good predictor of success within your organization, then what are they doing within your hiring process? You can quiz them to death on problem solving on a team night out and have fun that way and so on, but stick to things that truly draw out the competencies that you've decided that job role requires and the behaviors that your company culture requires as well.
So how do we tackle, and I guess that's an open question. I think I'd love to see you comment on this one as well. Sorry,
yeah,
Michael,
sure.
Do you want to comment something?
Sorry, before we go there, I was going to ask you something about that, Fede, and this kind of came into my head this week. Is it important for you as the interviewer to read a CV before you go into the interview? And that might sound like an obvious question, but the reason I'm thinking about it is when I was interviewing, when I was on the other side of the chair, I used to hate it when I come in and people say, "Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?" And I'm sitting here going, "Why did you read my CV? I think it's seriously." So but now I'm thinking, doesn't that reading the CV before, how much does that actually feed into your biases before actually meeting the person?
So let's take that one. And Angus, you wanted to ask something, but I wanted to ask you as well something. So there's three questions here on the click. One is reading the CV beforehand. And you're asking Angus, yeah?
Look, I do things, I probably do things very differently. The way I do recruiting is I deal with recruiters a lot as a contractor. So I had a lot of very bad experiences, right? I'm still waiting for feedback on jobs I applied for 5 years ago. So I try to do things as differently to what they did as possible, right? Do I read resumes? I read them 3 times, right? But it doesn't sound as good as what it sounds, right? When I reach out to someone, I'm always hunting. So when I send someone, when someone sends me the resume after I've interacted with them on LinkedIn and they have a very basic LinkedIn, I'll look at the resume and I'll scan it for about 30 seconds. I'll make sure the content of that ties into the job. Then I'll immediately go and I'll schedule a call. I will open that resume about 5 minutes before a call, if that, right? And I'll just run through it again. The problem for me is if you are purely hiring, like, you see a lot of resumes. That's why I do resume reviews, because I have seen a massive amount of resumes. So I'll read the resume.
Sorry to jump in there. Something important to qualify, right? What's the point of a resume? The point of the resume is to get you to the interview.
Yes,
that's the only point of a resume, people.
It is literally, the resume is there to get you the interview. Interview is there to get the job, and it's the company's job to hire you. A lot of companies will come to me and say, "Why won't this person accept this offer?" I'm like, well, firstly, I told you why. And secondly, it's not my job for you to hire them. It's my job to bring them to you. It's your job to hire them. So you need to, sweeten the loaf for them. So I'm bad, right? The next time I read a resume is when I do my submission. So I have a candidate qualifying form. I've got 3 bloody screens. So I'll have your profile on my vertical screen on the right. I'll have your resume and my form. The purpose of what I do, in theory, I don't do interviews. I do clearing calls, right? I wanted to touch on what you were saying earlier about postponing a call. Me, I do postpone calls. And the reason is this, and I feel bad about it now, but let me be honest about this. I do CTFs. I mess around in Cali. I know a lot of people in the industry. I've watched a ton of Black Hat talks, DEF CON talks. I understand security to a very in-depth level as a recruiter, right? Like, I'm confident in my know-how. But what I'm in essence doing when I'm doing calls with staff security engineers and distinguished engineers and advanced red teamers and CNOs and like hardcore people, I'm in essence, I won't say this word, I'll say blagging my way. I'm pulling the wool over on those calls because I have to make like I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm talking about, but in essence, I have to play a bit of a game. And if I'm not in the right mind space, I'm not going to take the right notes potentially, and then I'm not going to pitch you effectively to a client. Like, that's part of what I do as a recruiter, and the value that I add is I deal a lot of people that are neurodiverse. I deal a lot with people that are like complete introverts, right? No social media, no nothing. I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to sit with my headphones on and code all day, right? And that's cool. My clearing call, one of the biggest things I'm achieving with a clearing call, which you never tell someone, but it's the honest truth, is to make sure you're not crazy, right? I always tell people on the call, look, got your resume in front of me, I got your profile in front of me. Tell me your story. What could you instant security? A lot of times I don't even have to do questions. I will, from you communicating your story to me and asking a few little questions here and there about technical stuff, I judge your ability with the wording you use and with what confidence you say it. If you're telling me you're applying for a senior pen test job, I'm like, okay, tell me about the last 3 tools you used that aren't on Cali. And they go, oh, that thing,
So
Z-Attack.
let me pivot this to you, Angus. Right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to not put the burden on the candidate right now. We're trying to put the burden on the interviewer, the hiring manager.
Yeah.
So what can you do to be a more supportive hiring manager we're in that situation? So, and you're probably an anomaly here, right? Because you're a recruiter.
Yeah, I mean, but remember, I'm in the middle. So
yeah,
biggest thing that hiring managers fail at is not knowing who they're going to talk to when they interview. I'm a recruiter, so I deal a lot with this day in, day out. So right, but I've got a process with this. If you're an interviewer, spend 10 minutes. Look at what I sent over. Look at the submission. I tell a story in my submission. Look at their resume. If they've got LinkedIn, look at their LinkedIn. See what they're interacting with. Look at what they're doing on Twitter. Look at their blog. Show a bit of a vested interest in that person. Even if you don't have a true interest or desire in that person, right? To join your company.
I hope you don't have a desire in that person, Angus. That's
no. Like, make sure you sound psyched to hire that person.
Yeah.
It achieves 1/3 of the offer process. Yeah, you already leaps and bounds ahead when it comes to offer, because you can offer someone a ridiculous amount of money and they won't accept it.
And I guess that's a really good point. I like it. So, which is, don't forget, you're also selling a job. Hiring managers, you're not the privileged person in this conversation. You're both privileged. You need to be selling your
the candidate
role
has the most power. Yeah. You can offer a candidate. I've seen candidates reject an offer that is life-changing money in my books. Someone gets an offer for $650,000 in San Francisco, and I'm like, and the guy's like, you know what? I don't like the people there. I don't like the culture. You can offer him $1 million. They probably wouldn't accept it, right? So the candidate holds power, and where hiring managers forget that is on feedback. If you reject someone as they apply for a job, give them a sentence. Say like, hey, we needed someone with a bit more of this, and you didn't have that. Right?
I was totally going to jump into this point being my probably third biggest point of feedback. And Harry's just unmuted himself. I want his opinion on this one.
If you interview people, give them feedback.
Yes, please.
I once had a client send me the feedback from all 6 people that interviewed someone in a panel. And I was like, thank you they rejected the guy, right? But I was like, thank you so much, because I can go back to this candidate and say, okay, buddy, like this you messed up, right? But this you did well. It was a combination of this, and this that made this not work out. So pretty much you were close, but that one thing that you had missing, no experience in AWS, no experience in Azure or whatever, that was the failing point. So if we work on that, we got a shot in the future. Whereas some people just don't.
It's a really interesting litmus test when you ask your interviewers to provide feedback and they say, can't. Why can't you? Because either you weren't listening or you rejected them based on something else, and something else probably means some form of cognitive bias or actual bigotry or something even worse. So if you can't provide some form of constructive reason why you're not hiring them other than I didn't like them, go deeper than that. It's okay that you didn't like them, but that has to do with certain attributes they failed to demonstrate. Did you find them untrustworthy in the way they told you that they did a bit of grey hat work on the side in their last job, or did they offer to bring their client book with them, which tells you their integrity is low? that's fine. Say you didn't like them because of those specific key reasons, and then allow the recruiter or the person, whoever is the intermediary, to decide how to wrap that in a professional way, but give whoever is that intermediary the tools and the feedback to do their job.
I'll briefly jump in on that just very quickly. I did a GDPR request when I didn't get feedback from a role and got the entire interview notes for the interview that I had attended. Everything they had written and every single document that I had submitted, my CV came back with notes on the side of it and everything. I'm not saying that candidates should do it, but I'm saying if we're pitching this at interviewers, remember that everything you do can be released if the right levers are pulled by the candidates.
I got to bring this to a relative close, 4 minutes. Sorry, Max. I'll hand over the baton in 2 minutes. I just wanted to deal with one more question and then open for the questions that Harry and the team might have been receiving, so we can do at least 2 questions before we move on to the last session. The last one that I had was, how do we deal with the companies that don't have the time to do the perfect job spec, right? So there's an investment of time here, and it presents this perfect situation where you're assuming that you have all the time in the world to create the job spec and socialize it with the entire management team and check the skills and make sure that there are no biases into the questions. That takes time. And a lot of the times when we're hiring, we needed people yesterday. So you go, you know what, just go look for a security analyst and see what you find and drag the bottom up. There's an obligation. I think there's a really fine line here. And I'd like to see how you guys deal with this one and what your opinions are, right? So there's a fine line between the ideal utopic world, how we go into recruitment, and the realities of, by the time a lot of us are doing recruitment, we're already too late and the teams are stressed and we're at risk of losing a deliverable, right? So one of the things I volunteer is, there's a community of people here that, although we are named competitors, if you want, on a day-to-day basis, we're all caring about the people that we hire, and we all want the right outcomes for the community. So if you don't have the time to write job spec because you're in an emergency and you're burning hot, reach out to us and we'll help you contribute with, look, this is the one that I wrote last. Pick from here what you like. Harry, he'll give you the one that he wrote the last time. We will all help try to get it right for you, because if one of us gets it wrong, we're all suffering, right? That means the whole community is not doing right. We need to get the right people in the right roles. But I also acknowledge there's a massive time pressure sometimes on these roles. So maybe, Harry, do you want to pick up on that? And Gary, I know you were wanting to talk.
I was just going to say, perfect is the enemy of getting things done and getting things moving forward. And it's a balancing that and not making it a, just screw it, we'll just do whatever and, steal a crappy job spec off a, job aggregation service that was written by someone with no insight into the actual competencies the roles required. There are a number of organizations that produce really decent, not perfect, no, none of them are, but really decent frameworks that you can leverage to get you started. And some of them are actively being used in the community. There's the Chartered Institute of Information Security. They do a capability development methodology, skills framework, and competency framework. There is the NIST NICE framework, which provides, I think, 52 different role definitions with a bunch of associated competencies. And there's the Sophia 7 framework, which has an entire domain to cybersecurity. So, don't sit there with a blank piece of paper and go, what does a pen tester do and what do I need from them? Start with something that's already being peer reviewed, already being used in your industry. Then, as Fanny said, send it to someone you might know and say, we're a small startup, we're looking to do this. Here's what we're looking for. Does that make sense? And then get someone with maybe a bit more experience to critique it. Don't try and start from nil. And we've tried to do this ourselves in our Dharma previously. We've kind of gone, we need to spend a whole day workshopping this thing. I'm like, but there's this one right here. They're like, that's amazing. Where did you get that? I Googled security analyst. And then I followed a few links down a rabbit hole and found this framework. And now we can align things to this cool methodology. And they're like, that's amazing. It's like, yeah, well done. Welcome.
Welcome to your Google skills.
Exactly.
Gary, any comments, or do you want to pick one of the questions from the list that we can attack before we move on to the next session?
I think we can see how Harry's been promoted now, though. He's let you in on a secret there on an internal scaling. Harry, do we
we were doing our best when we were hiring at that time. Don't judge us too harshly.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You get where you get. Do we have any questions on the Slido?
I'm trying to see if there are any specific.
While you do that, I'll take an action on this one, Gary, and we can work it together. I think what I'd like to do in the interest of time is I'll post all the ones that I had that were my brain dump in a wiki online somewhere. And if we can make it more editable so that we can all contribute ours until we decide to close it for a couple of weeks. So if put an action on me, and we'll pick that one up so that we can share the notes afterwards.
So we've got our public GitHub repos, probably the easiest way for that. We can do that.
Perfect.
And then we'll share the link out on Twitter and the Slack channels.
So the highest voted for question that is specific to you, it's not relevant to the topic directly, but I think it's an interesting one. But it's how important for the founder of a cybersecurity business is to have technical skills when you have a technical team below you. Does that give you less or more credibility as a kind of cybersecurity leader?
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that one. I think as a founder, it gives a certain amount of confidence to your customer that you can understand what you're trying to achieve, and that you're not here just for the bucks or to flip a company, because cybersecurity is a thriving industry. So in my case, I think I felt a lot more compelled to, I know exactly what I want to do. I know my hypothesis that I want to go prove. I'm going to do my best to get it to MVP, and then I'm going to surround myself with people that are way smarter than me to help me take that to reality. And that's the way we grew Quorum Cyber. I think I had an idea, I had an understanding of the problem, and I understood the technology enough to be able to shape it into, look, I believe we can do this if we take it this way. So it worked for us. I don't think that's necessarily a golden rule. There are many companies whose CEOs and MDs are good business people, good salespeople, good marketing people. That doesn't mean that you can't run. And I think going back to the interviewer, it's an incredibly accurate point. Not every interviewer has to be a professional expert in the role that you're hiring. You need to be competent at being able to analyze the variables you're trying to curate for that human that's going to occupy that role. But that doesn't mean you need to be the best pen tester in the universe if you're hiring a pen tester. A lot of the times you're hiring people that are way better than you, and that's absolutely okay, because it's not about just a skill competition of who's the best at this thing. It's about, are you the right fit for the problem that we have, and can you help us be better, and can you support others around you, and can we lean on you when we're needing help? These are the things that I think we're looking at. So to answer the question, I'm not necessarily sure that you need to be a technical awesomeness if you're going to be a founder. In our case, I'm definitely not, and we still got there. So if anything else, it proves you can be a medium to average technical person and still figure it out. On that note, I will end this session, pass over the baton back to Harry, and I'm going to go cook veggie burgers for my family. Have a good night, team. I'm sorry I couldn't stay for longer. Take care. Bye.
No worries.
Thanks a lot.
Let me add something onto what Fedi said, which is usually if I need to hire someone, I want to hire someone that knows more than me, because I need them to deliver the work so that I can do something else. And this is really, really important. Obviously, if I'm hiring juniors, I'm not expecting them to do sort of, I've been working in this industry for many years. So I'm not expecting them to be able to deliver the same kind of work I deliver, but I do expect them to deliver some of the work better than me, because they are going to have a different a different approach, a more fresh approach even, and that's perfectly fine. That's definitely something I think Fedi touched on, and it's really, really important, getting smart people to work with you.
I just have one small thing to add on feedback that Fedi was talking about, and we've been talking about throughout. And I've just used the example currently, as I said, I got loads of applications for one junior role that I have. Now, I can't give feedback to everybody I don't interview, just because it's basically based off the CV. I absolutely agree with Fedi that once I've interviewed you, you should get proper feedback, because we've met, we've had a conversation, right? But if you're on the other side and you basically apply for something and you either get that canned rejection email from a system or something, if you reach out to me after that to say, could I please get some feedback on why my CV was rejected, I will respond, because that's like one thing to do, then I will do.
Yeah, like don't be scared. People, candidates also take the human factor out of using a recruiter, both internal and someone like me. Like I always tell people, like the best way you're going to achieve success is in this process, especially if it's a long drawn out process and cadence between interviews is slow, is reach out to me and say, hey, Charlie, what the hell is going on here? And I'll go, oh, hold on. Yeah, we're still on our holding pattern. Or, listen, sorry, I just got informed that they turned you down, and this is the reason. Like, don't be so scared to reach out and ask. I've had there's a balance, right? I've had people where they email me and they ask me why. And they said, I thought I did really well in the interviews. And then I reply, I'm like, hey, buddy, like, you haven't even been sent to the client. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but fair enough, right? I will then, if people then ask me and I give them feedback, a lot of times I'll be super appreciative. And I'll say, like, look, this job requires this level of clearance. You do not possess that clearance. And they come back and say, but I'm eligible. I'm like, I get that, but we need someone that's active now. But then you'll also get people that will fight it, like tooth and nail. And at that point, I always tell them, right? I will tell them, like, look, if you want to go apply to that company directly, like, by all means. But it's when people don't want to take the message, don't want to accept it, that it can become an issue. But yeah, I fully agree. If you get rejected on an application that you felt confident with, then by all means reach out and say, hey, why was I rejected? I will always take time out of my schedule. It takes a couple of seconds. Quickly pull up your profile, pull up your resume, and go, why did I reject? Oh, that's why I rejected them. And then tell them, like, even if it's just 1-2 sentences, I'll always do that. I advocate that. Like, us recruiters can add a lot of value to your hiring experience. Like, use us. Like, we get paid good money when we do get paid, right? So use and abuse us. We're providing you a service. So take full advantage of us, Like, I'm available 20 hours a day. Like, I've got people texting me all hours of the night. So it's the best way to do it.
So a final comment, and then I think we'll move on, is building on some previous comments, is if you're a hiring manager, i.e. if you're or an interviewer, as they may be different, part of your job role is conducting interviews or is hiring people. So therefore, if you've got 100% capacity and that takes up 20-30% of your capacity, well then, yeah, of course you're going to be hiring people possibly even to similar roles to you sometimes that might be better than you. And that's because in many cases that they don't have those things to speak to and to have a responsibility. And again, did you have something you wanted to add in the end?
I just wanted to say, sometimes people get rejected for positions. Don't take that rejection personally. It's just sometimes you're just not a good fit, and that's it. It's fine, and that's where the feedback comes in. I try to provide feedback as much as I can. I don't do it as often as I should probably, but just like Max, if someone reaches out and say, well, what happened here, I'm more than happy to provide feedback there. And I think that's true for most people in reality.
Okay, so last but by no means least, we're now going to move on to our kind of final topic, and that is about the interview itself. So I think we've talked around this a little bit already, but I would now like to focus specifically on, in the interview, the door's locked, you're stuck inside, and to see if, this wonderful group of people who are giving us some of their time to kind of think about some of the things that we think you could do or not do, as the case may be, to hopefully make your interview experience better. I think, we've covered some of it about preparation, about things you do beforehand, some of the things you can do afterwards, like asking for feedback and, not being too pushy. But when you're squarely in the middle, you've sat down and you're facing a panel or an interviewer, what are some of the things that this group of people that we think is good advice to give to some of the people still watching?
If I may say, if you're walking into an interview and they lock the door behind you, consider where your exits are and get out as quick as you can.
Yeah, or it's for the Pentagon.
Or in the year of 2020, it's set in front of your camera and have an interview, right? So, yeah, I can appreciate how hard it might be for some people. I've literally just had an Apache helicopter go overhead, so you can't account for everything.
I think with the interview prep, like we spoke about it earlier, like on the interview, you always want to present the best version of yourself. You have to show the interviewers that you understand the content that you're going to discuss. You have to mentally prepare for the fact that they're going to ask you a question that you do not know the answer to. Um, that is not necessarily a brain teaser. That literally means if they see you're a Linux person, they might ask you something very in depth about Windows internals. And to some extent, that is in essence to make you stumble a bit, make you sweat a bit. And it's not a power play. They want to then understand what your problem solving methodology is. A lot of companies will ask that, and then the right answer is, look, I've used Windows very, very little, but my approach to it would be as this. This is what I did more with Linux. I would look at this, I would look at the logs there, I would consider that, I would seek advice from this, this place, and that's how I solve problems. So with that is trying to solve something that you don't understand. Because looking at your resume, they'll know exactly to a high degree what you know and don't know. And then always do research on the company. There is also it's as easy for me to say as cliched. There's a fine balance in doing research in a company, but there isn't. We all know what kind of information we want to disclose in an interview about the company that's interviewing you. That sounds more like you're interested and psyched about the company, and less that you're a bit creepy. Like I always say, never hack your way into the job. I know people that have hacked their way into a job at a company, but it tends to not work very well. So do your research on the company, look at the board of directors, look at the people that are interviewing you, have little tidbits about them. My first interview at the Army was at a company called MAS doing maritime security and anti-piracy. Like I went a bit in depth. Like that's where I found LinkedIn as well, because I found all the directors that are going to interview me. And the guy would come up and let's say his name was Miguel. I was like, oh, Miguel, you went to such and such university and you studied a master's degree. That's fantastic. And you find stuff on their Facebook. Like it's fine to have that information. You'll feel a bit more powerful in that situation. But I've heard of people in an interview go to one of the senior managers that's not technically sound into this sort of product or whatever, say to an interviewer, or the interviewee said to the interviewer, I'm really impressed that you got your stuff locked down so well. What that meant was the person had their Facebook settings set very high so that you couldn't get that information from them. What the interviewer understood that was that this person had played around and tried to crack their password. So the verbiage you use is important. Do your research on the company, but like if you go super in depth and do a full OSINT mission for a weekend on it, fair dues, go for it. But just be mindful of the information you disclose. Don't try I don't know what's the PC term for it. It's not a contest, submit the information that will show that you showed an interest in the company, but don't submit information that comes to your detriment.
Yeah, don't let your ego mean that you don't get a job. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yes.
And don't share breach passwords from people that you found online either. There's always a line in the sand, I think, is what we're trying to get to here.
Yeah.
But when you're in the job, check all incoming staff.
Because I think it's important to. So I've got two things to say here. First of all, you've got to remember that it's not just about your skills, right? And an interviewer or a company that's hiring you will look at a variety of things. Your skills is one thing, so what you can do is kind of what Charles was talking about there. The other thing is your approach. Like, as we were talking about earlier, if you don't know the answer or you haven't had a particular experience of a competency-based thing, how would you approach it? What would your, hypothetically, how would you do it? What is your approach to a problem rather than getting the answer? And we're also looking for cultural fit. So sometimes you might be a great person and I want to go have a beer with you, but I'm looking at the other people on my team and I'm thinking, you just won't really gel. And that's fair enough. It's not, and then it's not about you. It's just not the right time, the right place for you to be there. The other thing that I would say in an interview is don't be afraid of silence. It's fine. So once someone has asked a question, don't immediately jump in, because that's when you start to ramble and you're like not too sure, and you're kind of still trying to think about the question while you're talking, and there's not that filter between your mouth and your brain. It's fine. Take a moment. Say to them, that's a very interesting question. Let me think. And take a moment. Think. Grab a glass of water. And when you're in an interview, always ask if you're offered water, take it. If you're at home, make sure that you have a glass of water next to you. Taking a sip of water is a very natural way for a pause in the conversation that gives you just a moment to process, to think, to structure your answer, and then respond.
I would also add, if you are a person that naturally speaks quite quickly, or especially when under pressure speaks very quickly, and I say this as somebody who in my first job as a computer technician at 18 was banned from answering the phone to customers because they couldn't understand me. Tap your foot, almost like a metronome, just a tick, tick.
I had someone do that the other day, literally like 3 days ago.
Really useful. It doesn't have to be big and obvious and really hard, but just a nice gentle under the table or under your desk if it's remote. And what you'll find is that as your speech speeds up, so will your foot. And that's a much more physical reminder that, oh, something's changed. I know it's probably my speech, and you can quickly make that connection. And I don't need to do it anymore because I'm more cognizant of my speech and so on. But for years, it really helped me just tap, tap, tap. Really works well.
I might actually try that, because the first two parts of my calls when I do with candidates is the same. It's not scripted. It's scripted in my brain. It's imprinted. It's an introduction to who I am, an introduction to who my company is. And my missus, who works with me, she will come to me and she'll just stare at me, like give me one of those side resting faces, like what are you on? Because I'll be rambling it out, because it's like I've done it that many times, and I have to be cognizant of the fact that I've said this so many times and I'm just rambling it, right? So that's something I will try. The biggest, I have two massive flaws, and I think becoming a recruiter has taught me a lot about. It's made me look intrinsically into myself and realize what I'm good at. I am really bad at interrupting people, and I think I inherited that from my father, who's partially deaf, and I'm also going deaf. So he was one of those. If he's talking, he doesn't need to listen. People. And the other thing is, and I did this once on this call, which I'm cognizant of, is I branch off. So this is the question, stick to that question, because I will start talking about this like, oh, but this is a key bit to add to this. And then I'm going in that direction. By that time, I forgot what the secondary was. And then I forgot what the question was. And then I just go like, sorry, what is the question?
Yeah.
So
and
if
at
someone
that
told the
point,
question, yeah,
I think it's great to pause. Two things here are your friend. Ask the interviewer, did that answer your question?
yeah.
And they'll probably say no and bring you back, which is fine. But good on you for recognizing at that point, did I say enough? Or you could ask, do you need any clarification? Is there something you want to clarify? Those kind of questions. Also, before you get into that point, if you don't understand the question, don't answer it. Ask before. We didn't really touch on it in the previous session, but I think from a hiring manager perspective here, this is not a challenge. This is not a trick question. I'm really just trying to get a sense of you to see how you will fit into my team. I'm not trying to trick you at all. So if I'm asking a question, I've also got a bit of a weird accent sometimes. If I'm asking a question that you don't understand, or I'm using terminology that you don't understand, just stop and check and ask me, what do I really mean? What is it I really want to know? And we'll clarify.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, hiring managers and interviewers, they want you to be successful. Just think about it from a pure productivity perspective. Interviews interrupt the day. It's still a very important part of the day, but it's still, it's breaking up your thought process from whatever thing you're working on and so on. To then go, well, didn't work. Now I've got to do another one tomorrow. That can suddenly fill up your week. So generally, they're in your corner. They want you to be successful. They want to help you put the best version of you forward so that they can go, yeah, you'll be a good fit and you match the competencies we need for the role you would do.
Something that Maggie said about the silence, I think a very important thing to be said is the candidate needs to be as relaxed as possible. It really, really helps if you're more relaxed, because you usually show your personality better, and most of the times it's not about at least I don't have any in my questions. I don't have any question that is like that eliminates you from getting a job. It's just a matter of, I want to know if you're trying to blag yourself out of the interview or blag yourself through the interview. Um, uh, I want to know if you are afraid or not afraid to say, look, I don't know right now, but I need I need to check. Especially as a pen tester, you are put in front of clients to justify why you think certain things are an issue, or just you're usually put on the spot with, okay, this is what we have. Is this an issue? And you sort of need to talk to the client and explain, well, I'm not sure. I need a little bit of time just to think about what you just explained, and I will let you know, and I will give you an answer. You need to trust my answer. So as more relaxed as you are, I also have the problem with the accent, especially here in Scotland. Clearly, English is not my first language. I even say acronyms a different way, with a nondescript accent, because I've lived everywhere in the world. But it is really, really important. I think that's one of the things I say to all of the candidates that I interview is just relax. There is no question here that will sort of prevent you from getting the job, regardless of what the answer you give me, even if it is an incorrect answer. I just want to know, if you give me an incorrect answer and I explain that to you, will you be able to realize that you were incorrect? That's one of the things I try to do in my interviews. It's not always successful, but right.
If I can add to that, like, we all understand the stress of doing an interview.
Yeah.
Like, I do interviews or clearing calls on a daily basis, and still after 4 years, I find it very stressful, right? Because sometimes I speak to people and I literally will tell them on that call, I will say, look, um, I must be honest with you. I'm not 100% sure I can fully captivate your technical abilities, because you're like on a whole other level, right? So having that confidence to not know something, but being able to demonstrate how you would solve that, or where you would find the potential solution to solve that, is valuable. I think also, as hiring manager, sometimes I have a bad day and I can't fathom the thought of doing a technical call with someone, because I'm not feeling it, right? And I know that's very selfish, right? But as a hiring manager, and me as talking to people, they will find, sometimes they'll find it stressful to speak to me, even if you tell them, look, we're just gonna have a chat, like nice and casual. Like, if an interviewer says, like, keep things casual, you can be casual, but still remember you're in an interview. You're not chatting to your buddy, right? But as a hiring manager, if you think someone's talking to you and you think they're having a bad day, or the biggest tell sign that someone is vexed on a call is they don't stop. They will talk and you can literally hear them mid sentence, like, stop, like breathe in, and then just ramble on. And at that point, you just go like, stop, 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 stop. Just hold on and pause. Like, are you all right? Take a breath. Like, relax. You're doing fine. Like, just take like 10 seconds to compose yourself and move on. Because I do that as well. I find that confidence. If I talk to someone, it's not an ego thing. I feel the necessity. I have a personal flaw in that. My missus says I have a perpetual need for self-validation. I need someone to go to me and say, good job, Charlie, like, well done, right? And I wear that flaw with pride. It's fine. It's something I need to work on myself. But um, if you literally just stop someone in an interview and just say, hey, take a breather, you're doing fine, like, compose yourself and move on, you'll find that person does all right, because they going to be talking so much they're not going to be breathing in. They're starving their brain of oxygen, and they're going to start saying stupid stuff at some point. So giving that person the chance to have a quick like rest break, even if it's just a couple seconds, can help reset an interview, and then the person will continue in.
For in-person
in a more relaxed manner.
For in-person interviews, obviously they're probably rare at the moment. Always take the glass of water. That is always the advice. It's not about the glass of water. It's never about the glass of water. It's about giving yourself an opportunity to pick something up and take a drink and think about it without feeling the need to. Mag, that goes back to your point. Don't feel the silence.
It feels like your mouth. It's like a space-time continuum. Like your mouth is talking, but your brain is like lagging behind. And I do that as well myself. When I do talks, I will start rambling, and then I'm watching the ticker go, and I'm like, I'm burning time in this talk on something pointless. So having that quick like and going on is it can be a godsend,
And I suppose you never know when your mouth's going to dry up as well, right? I mean,
very true.
Many benefits. Water's good for you.
So I think let's do some relatively fast fire, not too fast fire, but just let's see if we can get to 10 things to definitely not do in an interview, and I'll kick us off with one, and we'll just jump in when you've got one, and we'll see where we get to. So for me, quite specific, but nonetheless, if it's an in-person interview and I can see the back of your laptop, make sure it doesn't contain the word fuck. That is a pet hate. I love stickers, got them covering my laptop too, but just consider when you're being asked to deliver a presentation to a bunch of interviewers, they, as a professional presentation, possibly don't have the word fuck big in center on your laptop. It's just not giving me it just doesn't fill me with confidence when I'm going to hire you as a consultant and put you on site with a customer.
Anyone was thinking if we make any monetization in adverts, AdSense money off these adverts, you now know this video is not monetized in any way now, because it's just
I mean, someone else go.
There's obvious ones, right? Don't be late.
Saying what? I try to teach my daughter to not say the word what. I teach her to say, excuse me, or can you repeat that? What is such a...
so general politeness.
Yeah, like I'm partially deaf in my left ear, thanks to the British Army, right? So I struggle to hear stuff. So if I ask someone to repeat, I will say like, my apologies, can you repeat that question, or can you say that again? Saying what is I don't know. I know it's a small thing, but it's something to be considerate of.
I think it's not that small a thing, and it's everything around not being polite. How's it, bruv? Not very professional. If you're going to be working in professional environments, we expect you. That's how you're going to act in front of clients and other teams. So yeah.
Okay.
I would say listen to the question until the interviewer finishes the question.
Yeah, not jumping in.
Yeah, don't jump in.
That's me right there. Another thing I would add is the branching thing. Try keep it as centric to that question as possible, and you need to learn to feel the room. Right? It's a bit difficult on a video call, but the idea is when someone asks you a question, submit as much information as you can about that subject to the highest degree possible. Kind of don't stop until they're like going like, yes, like taking a little note. I've done calls with people that are neurodiverse, which is fine, but you'll ask them a question like, what is your experience with pen testing? And they'll say, I've done pen testing. And you're like, okay, like it's like pulling blood from stone.
Yeah.
Try and submit as much information as you can to fulfill the answer. And kind of when you get the feeling like you've answered it and everyone's giving you the nod, then say, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just trying to move you along. That's okay.
It's the balance between, in an interview, it's good to assume that most questions you're asked are open-ended. It's not a yes or no. It's not binary. It's not, do you have experience in Java? Yes. It's, yes, when I in fact refactored the code base and showed a 20% improvement, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so that's definitely one. Another pay for me is if you don't know how to answer a competency-based question. Now, it's, again, a specific one, but many interviews either have situational-based questions or competency-based questions, and they will take the form of something along the lines of, can you give me an example when you had confrontation at work, and how did you deal with it? Okay, now there are many different questions in that sphere, and some I think are quite bad and full of bias that we talked earlier, but some are really useful, and there are very specific techniques. STAR and SMART, that's the other one. Yes, STAR and SMART are two of those frameworks. Not going to cover them, but do go look them up. They're both really decent, and all you have to do is just remember an acronym, and it will get you in a mindset of, I know how to answer this question with the situation, and so on and so on and so on. And the interviewer can go, yep, they can name a situation, yep, they can explain what they did, and they can explain the result. Awesome.
Yeah, I would clarify that question. That would be the other thing, right? So if you're not sure and you're going, right, well, there's that time that, George from the office and I had a fight because he used my coffee mug. And then there's that time that I dealt with a really complex situation where there was various stakeholders, and one team wouldn't agree to do something because it put their work in jeopardy, but it was a security risk if the thing I wanted done wasn't dealt with. I would clarify, are you looking for something where my personal skills are used, or where my skills at handling conflict in a business sense are maybe better? I have examples for both, but, I think most of the time it should be clear, especially as you go for more senior roles. But it's very easy to read the word confrontation and immediately think it was the last time you had an argument, and that is not the majority of confrontation that you experience in business. The same go for lots of words that have that kind of weight to them. There's always the word about compensation and things, and the way that goes, and compensation doesn't always mean compensation. Sometimes it just means how you compensated in terms of how you balance that out. So always be, if there's a word that has duality to it, or multiple meanings, please clarify it, because you can sometimes give an answer, and I've not done a lot of interviewing at this level, but elsewhere have slightly, and you very much go, did they get that question? They didn't get that question, did they?
I also think those STAR model things that we were talking about, those are the kind of things you can practice. You can Google any, competency-based type questions, and just sit with your mate or your mom or your dog and just go through the STAR model and try and, practice, because those are the kind of things that comes easier with time. The more you do them, the easier they become.
Yeah, and I think that's as a general piece of advice, and it goes from CVs to personal profiles to covering letters to interviewing, practice all of these things, and use the people you have access to. If you only right now have access to your immediate family, use them. If it's some friends that are in a different industry, use them. I once did a role play for a flatmate of mine who was going into reproductive medicine, and I pretended to be a 14-year-old girl suffering from an STI who had come into her clinic because she was warned that would be on her test, as a real role play, because they did practical role plays. And she said I was better than the examiner. So, I took that as a massive, massive plus.
Top tip: don't live with Harry.
Yeah, I got worried when he started going halfway through his answer. I would say something that we have already mentioned is not being prepared for the typical questions that you're going to be asked. It's, be it technical questions. I specifically mentioned technical questions here because that's the bulk of the type of questions that I do ask, or the majority of the questions that I have asked. Now that I'm handling things at a different level, it has shifted a little bit. But in terms of technical interviews, you do need to know the questions that are going to pop up at all times, and don't try to blag it when you don't know something. Just say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that, or I don't know. Can you give me some hints? And most of the times, the interviewer is going to at least point you in the right direction. They won't give you the answer, but they will sort of point you to where you should be, especially on technical interviews, with where the person that's interviewing you is also sort of super technical. They will have the tools to sort of, oh, I'm looking for something around this, or they can rephrase the question or give you, here's an example, how would you solve this, etc., etc.
Yeah. So there are a couple of questions. Well, one actually is just a really good point. And that is, don't be afraid to say I don't know. Rarely will an interview, at least the ones I've been involved in, will have a question for which if you don't answer, it's an instant fail. Interviews on the back end are usually based on some form of scoring mechanism, or they'll just exchange one question for another. And I think that's a really good point. So thank you, Josh, for pointing that out. Really good point. Someone would like an example of a good star answer, which I'm not sure if anyone would like to be put on the spot.
Give me a question. I'll go.
Well, I don't know if I want to ask the confrontation one again. Gary, do you have a star competence-based question?
I would be pushing. No.
Okay. Max, could you please give me an example when you had to communicate with senior stakeholders, and what techniques did you use to make sure that what you tried to get across was successful?
Okay.
Regretting
Let me
saying
give you an
yes.
example of a presentation I had to do a month ago, where there was various different stakeholders, so different business teams, and essentially what we were trying to ask for was, we put a proposal forward, and we needed time and resource from each of those teams to actually get a product delivered, which would have been of benefit to other teams, which don't actually affect the people in that room. So I needed to understand, where my stakeholders are coming from, what would be important to them. So what I did, how I approached that, is I actually spoke to their teams beforehand, not them, because they were really senior, and to try and get time in their diaries was really difficult. But I went to speak to people in their teams just to find out kind of what their priorities are, what their workload is like at the time, to try for myself to preempt their answers, and the questions that they would come up with. So I worked that kind of into my presentation. And I'm happy to say that after we presented and answered all their questions, we were really successful in getting the resources we needed to deliver that product.
Fantastic. Thank you for the example.
How was that?
That was great. I feel it's only sporting giving you the option to ask me one back, since I put you on the spot so terribly.
Ooh.
Which I'm really nervous about now. I've not had to interview in a very long time on the receiving end.
I've had 5 interviews this week. Why can't I think of a single question? So could you give me an example of a time when you've had to give negative or unwelcome advice to a project or a team that you were working with, and how you approached that?
Sure. So the situation was, I was the solution architect for a large bank, and we were essentially doing a technology platform migration. The project was 6 months in and had just turned red as a project. So some pretty concerning delays and issues were coming up. And I was pulled in by the senior stakeholder to kind of explain why. I should point out, pulled in over the head of the project manager, the senior project manager that was involved. And this stakeholder essentially asked me to critique the way the project was being run, and to give an honest appraisal almost of the people that were working on it, which was interesting, as I was, of course, one of those people. And so I had to essentially, because I do value honesty, and I think it's a really important behavior, I was honest and critiqued some of the people working there, but I tried to do so in a really constructive, evidence-based way. So 2 people that I essentially did give a negative review or critique of, and the impact I felt they had on the project, I still balanced that with that the broader team, including myself, should still have been able to pick up on some of these things earlier and identifying both individual faults, but still wrapping it around an overall failing in process, and that the team, including myself again, was still responsible for the overall failing. So I felt that I balanced the specific constructive feedback for individuals that weren't delivering to the level they should have been, but that I think that the responsible party was still the whole team, and it was important to point that out, and it was very well received. No one was fired or taken off the project, but the stakeholder, in their wisdom, decided to send a team-wide message using some of the specific personal critiques, but they applied it to the general team and said, I believe there are some things we should work at. And by, again, I hope focusing on the team component in my critique, it hopefully prompted them to not just go and start, taking names and cashing checks, if that's the turn of phrase, which I don't think it is. So yeah, that's my example.
Thank you very much.
I would hire right on the spot there.
Competition's hot.
Indeed. Awesome. So we've got a couple more general questions, not specific to interviewing, but let's just see if this audience has anything to offer. So can you recommend any CTFs for beginners or people with only a basic knowledge?
Ooh.
I mean,
can I say, with having no background, right? Favorite CTF, I enjoyed DerpCon, which is a small con/CTF run in the US, which was fun. If you've never touched a CTF, it is hair-raisingly scary until you do one and you solve one challenge, and then you're like, you've got the drug. Pico CTF. What I love about the Pico CTF is they release it after they've done the full competition. They release everything, right? And it starts off super basic, and you can get some results, and it feels bloody awesome, and it gets more and more advanced as it goes. And I think they have the Pico CTF up and running for, I think, 5 years after they've done the official competition. So if Pico, when it does come up, really look at that.
I would definitely recommend Over the Wire. I would recommend Immersive Labs, especially if you're in an sort of university or something. You do have I think they have, as long as your email sort of ends with EU or has EU edu, sorry, you are entitled to sort of like a free account. I would definitely look at not specifically CTFs, but nowadays we live in a time where there are actually vulnerable software that is vulnerable on purpose, so that you can learn about techniques, you can learn about techniques and vulnerabilities, etc. So things like Dem Vulnerable Web App, Goat, OWASP's Goat, and anything like this. These are resources that you can use, and there are many write-ups on it. There used to be, is it VulnDB? I think, where they have like a collection of vulnerable VMs and challenges that you can do. So all of those are great resources.
I've got a small community in South Africa called Hack South, and we have like a little CTF team. Like there's like 30 people on the team, but it depends who's available at that time. And we have a profile on CTF time, and then I also have a MESIC bot that pulls in the CTF time tweets, so that we hear about new CTFs. And typically, if we're sitting around in the week and we're going like, hey, a couple of us are free in the weekend, what's coming up? We can actually go on CTF time and see what the upcoming CTFs are. CTF time is not super well run, but it's because so many CTFs are coming into it, and it probably needs to be open source more, so that people who are running it can get more help. But that's a good place to find out. The problem is it's very hit and miss. A couple of us looked at the Google CTF last year, but we didn't compete in that. So we were looking to do it this year, And within about half an hour of the Google CTF, we realized this is like a insane level CTF. I think the guys finished one challenge and then, left it there. But yeah, you could find a massive resource for CTFs there. And one thing I wanted to add with immersive labs, like I myself, I'm a veteran. With immersive labs, you get free access. I got mine through Tech Vets, which is a really cool Discord that I'm on. They arrange something with immersive labs, and there's someone there that helps you out. And yeah, if you don't know about CTS, like ask around, ask on Twitter, like, hey, any cool CTS, doable CTS coming up, give me a shout. It won't take long for you to find information or people to give you information about it.
I would also add that it doesn't have to be CTFs. It doesn't have like the competition factor. Sometimes is not a good thing. It will frustrate you. It will make you feel like you're not worth it. So don't think that you need to compete in order to be in the game. Okay. There's a big difference between sort of playing ball and playing professional football or soccer or whatever. I call it football. So there's a difference between playing competitively and doing it just for sport, just for fun. So make sure you have fun. That's the most important thing, especially if you're learning. If you have fun while you're learning, you will get far.
Same thing if you're looking at HackerOne and BugCrowd, so your two public bug bounty places that we'd obviously recommend. There are others, but with those, we did a straw poll at one of our events previously, and we think 2 people had ever been awarded a bounty of any sort, whether that was paid or unpaid. These are great because they are public companies that put stuff out there, but you need to know what you're doing because you can have unforeseen circumstances. But
bug bounties have a problem, have a big problem, which is there are a lot of people looking at that, and it does frustrate you a lot. I do have a very, very strong opinion on bug bounties, but it's just my opinion. I know people that live off it well, but I think, sorry for the football analogy as well, there can only be one Messi, one Ronaldo. For each Messi and each Ronaldo, there are, I'm going to say, millions of players that probably earn very, very little money. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Good shout out for Tech Vets. They're actually one of our partners as well. Yeah, brilliant. So we are at time, and it's been a wild few hours. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you especially to all of our speakers, panelists, and supporting staff behind the scenes. It's been phenomenal to have everyone together and to run a remote event. Everyone that's asked questions and everyone's that's commented, again, getting that kind of engagement really helps us. It helps us know that what we're doing is valuable and doing something useful, or at least entertaining. You can find most of the people here on Twitter. You won't find it difficult to find them, I doubt it. And you'll also find them on our Slack. I've just posted the invite link into the YouTube comments as well. And if you search Cyber Scotland Connect on Google, you will find our website with links to all those things too. So a final thank you to everyone involved, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you all.
Bye.